Hi. So today I wanted to talk about failure and how I deal with it when it comes to trying new things with my business or trying new things in general in life. So this is a video that I've thought about doing for a long time because I get asked a lot of questions about a lot of different things, and believe it or not, a lot of those questions are like kind of sub-questions of this question of how you handle failure and how you handle trying new ideas. And I don't know how to get this out in a short period of time. So I don't really know how it is I'm gonna structure this video. And I've tried to structure it before. I've done it before, and I've always wound up failing. So one of the things that I've learned with doing YouTube content in general is that I think I understand something in my head. So I have a feeling that I know what I'm talking about. And then I sit in front of a camera to discuss what I thought in my head. And I realized that what I thought I understood, I don't understand at all. I actually started doing YouTube content not because it wasn't really out of this great desire to talk and like have an audience and have fans or anything like that. I actually, about 3.5 years ago, was seeing a therapist who was incredibly, incredibly unhelpful. So I had thought, since I had had a difficult life and I had a difficult time growing up and I've had a lot of strange challenges, that it may help if, in my mid-20s when I could finally afford it and I had free time, if I could go to see a therapist. Now, the therapist that I had, we would spend sometimes 10 to 20 minutes talking about technological problems that had nothing to do with me or therapy. I mean, he upgraded from Windows 7 to Windows 8, and the SPDIF and optical out on his computer stopped working. Like, we spent a half hour on that. And I kind of started to get the feeling after a certain amount of time that everything that I was doing in therapy, everything that he was bringing up to talk about was not necessarily to benefit me or to allow me to figure out who I am. It was really just so that he has to figure out how to get rid of that hour. And he just ran out of ideas. So we would do things like discuss issues upgrading from Windows 7 to 8 when I didn't bring this up at all, but he, knowing what I did for a living, would, and I would just talk about his audio drivers. So I eventually stopped going to therapy, and I realized that it was, at least with this particular therapist I was seeing, that it was complete bullshit. But what I learned was that the purpose of therapy is for somebody to guide you towards solving your own problem. So the whole idea behind therapy is not that they're going to tell you, you're doing this wrong with your life, here's how you need to change. They're going to ask you questions that, if done properly, will allow you to uncover your own answers. So I started realizing that when I would start discussing what I thought I understood, that I didn't really understand it as much as I thought, because when I would try to put it into words, I didn't know what I was talking about. And one of the things that I noticed with YouTube content is that when I know that potentially everybody in the world can see what I have to say forever, that it would kind of change how I phrase my thoughts. And I wouldn't lie about what I thought. It's just I would think something and I go, wait a second. Do I really think that? Because that seems pretty fucking dumb. Oh, yeah, that's a really bad idea. And then I would realize that what I had in my head was not as rational as it should have been. So doing YouTube content for me, and it really had nothing to do with wanting fans or fame or people to watch stuff. It was actually a great form of therapy, because when I knew that people were going to be listening to what I said, it kind of made me rethink what I was saying, and then I started to realize that some of the thought processes that I had, some of the ways that I was doing business, some of my viewpoints on the world at the time were not, like, they weren't completely irrational, but they could have been a lot more rational than they were. And I started to realize that I disagreed with myself on a lot of topics. So YouTube is really helpful for that. But getting back to the point here, it's with doing these types of videos, I kind of start to realize just how little I know about the things that I actually want to talk about. So this is one of those things where it's going to be, yeah, I don't script any of this. So the first video that I had done on failure, to get to the point since I wasted 4 minutes and 17 seconds babbling. So the first video I did on failure a few months ago, it revolved around how to properly reflect on failure. So part one of this is that the best way to reflect on failure is to think about what you can do different next time. You shouldn't be focused on what you should have done, what you could have done, because all that does, A, you're focusing on negativity, you're focusing on what you did wrong, and B, you're focusing on things that you cannot change. So you cannot change the past. You cannot do something differently. You can't go in a little time machine and do things differently. And further, in the present, if we're going to talk about anything, if we're going to put ideas into the world, they should be positive ideas about what we will do better next time, rather than negative ideas about what we should have done differently last time. That was the first part of it. But that's maybe about 10 to 20% of how it is I deal with failure and how I look to avoid failing in the future and encourage my team to continue trekking on with me through whatever it is I'm trying to do when it's obvious that right now we just really fucking failed. The second part of this has to do with planning. So a lot of people, I think, they're very paranoid in their thinking about failure. Even rational people will be paranoid in their thinking about failure. So I'll suggest an idea and they'll go, well, if that doesn't go well, then this will happen. And if this happens, then this will probably happen. And if that happens, this will probably happen, and blah, 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 blah. And they'll start planning this whole thing in their head about how it's going to go wrong. And what happens there is we use this part of our brain that we also use when we're trying to plan something that goes right. So let's take an example that I had. So when I received my first business loan, I thought everybody told me you should write up a business proposal or what it is you're going to do or how you're going to get it done. And you have to have everything on paper very, very clearly. You have to have a plan. And there was that whole bullshit that I think is bullshit, at least. If you fail to plan, then you plan to fail. You know, all that crap that you see. You know, people that don't actually work in the real world put on t-shirts and it's just stupid shit. But I would hear that, so I thought I'm going to make myself a plan. And that's what most people do. And most people make a plan. They look at when they're starting a business, they look at their target demographic, they look at the market, they look at their competitors, they look at the prices of everything, they look at what services or products they want to sell, they look at the area they're marketing them in, who they're marketing them to, all this type of stuff. And they make a little plan about how it's all going to be successful. And then they open a business in the real world, and in the real world, what happens is that very often their plan goes to shit. They make this very logical plan about how everything is going to go exactly according to this because I've done all the research, and then they go into the real world, and their plan completely falls flat in its face. Again, whether this is a plan on how you're going to afford a new mortgage for a new house, how you're going to start a repair business, how you are going to market a new application you've developed, or just how you're going to ask somebody out on a date. Like really, whatever it is, we make this little plan in our head based on what we perceive to be sound logic, and if this happens, then that will happen. If we do this, then we will get this. We make this really great plan in our head. And what winds up happening is that it all goes to crap. Even though we logically thought it out, it goes totally different than the way that we thought. And this is something that happens to me very often. Sometimes you may plan something and it goes exactly according to plan. Very often, it does not. So when we plan something to go properly, when we want something to go exactly as we want, even though we've come up with all these logical reasons as to why that will happen, it doesn't go that way. So why is it when it comes to failure that we have this great trust for this part of our brain that often fails us when we're trying to do things right? So think about it, just try to follow this for a minute. When we're trying to do things right, when we are planning everything out in all these little steps logically so that we will get exactly what we want, we don't get what we want. That part of our brain that's trying to think ahead and go, if this happens, then that will happen. If I start this store in this area, then we'll get these customers. If I market to these people, then they'll buy it. If the price is this, then they'll be interested. And then in the real world, none of that happens. If that part of our brain is wrong so often, then why do we listen to that part of our brain when it comes to failure? Why do we believe that these if-then statements are valid in the real world? If I take on this project and I do poorly, then my boss will be mad at me. If my boss is mad at me, then he will fire me. If I am fired, then I will not make money. If I don't make money, then I can't pay my rent. If I can't pay my rent, then I will be on the street. If I am on the street, then I will go hungry and freeze. And if I freeze and I go hungry, then I'm dead. So people would, again, I see this every single day. They may not say every single word of it out loud, but you can just see the wheels turning in their head where they're assuming this worst case scenario will occur and that this worst case scenario is actually relevant in the real world. And the reality is that at every single step, at every single one of those steps, there's not an if-then statement. It's not if-then. It's random. There are many different things that could happen at every juncture. So if I take this project and I fail, well, what if you don't fail? Or what if you fail, but you fail and the reason you failed didn't have anything to do with you, it had to do with something the company was doing wrong and the boss realizes that and doesn't blame you? Or what if the boss blames you and hates you, but his superiors like you? Or all the people who work under you like you, so therefore you're not fired? What if all that bad stuff happens? So let's assume you're right on the failure. Let's assume you're right in the fact that your boss fires you. What if this winds up allowing you to get picked up by another company that pays you twice as much to do a job you like more? Or what if all that happens? Let's say you get fired and you can't find a new job for 6 months. What if your landlord likes you and allows you time to find a new job and says, don't worry about it right now, but you're going to pay me back at this time when you have this money? What if your landlord, okay, let's say all your what ifs were correct and your landlord doesn't like you. Well, what if you live in New York City like I do, where housing court is backed up 18 months, so it doesn't really matter that he doesn't like you. Sucks to be him. You know, again, people assume that the worst possible thing will happen at every single if-then juncture. At every single point, the worst of the if-then will happen. And they not only assume that the worst of the if-then will happen, that the thing that has a 10% chance of happening will happen once, they think that that thing that has a 10% chance of happening is going to happen over and over and over again. So at the point of starting the project, what the boss will think of them, whether or not they'll be fired, whether or not their landlord will react poorly, whether or not their landlord will be able to get them. All this shit happens in their head, and the thing that has a 10% chance of happening, that 10% chance of happening, you assume that that's what's going to happen every single time. And that's not really the way it works. People think that failure is kind of like falling off a cliff where you jump off the cliff and now you fall straight down and now you die. It's really not like that. Failing is kind of like falling down a small flight of stairs. And oh, I caught myself on the railing. Or if you don't catch yourself on the railing, you catch yourself on the wall. The way people think failing happens, they actually think it happens in a manner where I fall down these stairs, and then instead of at the platform falling down, that I somehow tumble down the rest of the stairs, and then the rest of the stairs, and then the rest of the stairs. People kind of think that if I trip on one step on the 30th floor of a building, that I'm somehow going to go tumbling all the way down to the first floor and meet my doom. And that's not really the way it works. You catch yourself. So often, and even if you don't catch yourself the first time, just by sheer fucking chance, just because it is more likely that you're going to stop when you hit the wall at the end of that flight of stairs, rather than you magically spinning around 30 times in a row, just out of sheer chance, you're going to wind up succeeding at some point, and that success will then kind of take you back from the failure that you were getting yourself into. Let's see if I can use a practical example of this in the real world where I wasn't listening to my own advice and I worked myself up to the point of thinking that my failure was fatal. Because again, a lot of the ideas that I've been successful in implementing, a lot of the reasons that I've been able to be successful to this point, it's not because I'm the smartest person. It's not because I'm the most business-savvy person. It's not because I'm the best technician, the best salesman, the best businessman that I started with all the resources. It's really just I was okay with continuously throwing myself against a wall and trying new things and not being afraid of the consequences, of thinking, okay, I failed, but you know what? It's not going to go as bad as I think it is, so let's try again. And it was through that I was able to find ideas that worked before I sunk myself down in this little hole of self-pity and depression. So this is a pretty good one because it's pretty stupid, and I like to relate stories where I've done something that's really dumb because I feel like it kind of encourages these people who think that I'm smarter than I am. One of the things I get on this channel all the time that drives me nuts is when people will say, "Oh my God, I can't believe you can figure this stuff out. You're a genius, man." Because trust me, like for the people who know me, I am pretty fucking stupid. I do a lot of stupid stuff, and again. One of the reasons I did that blender video, for example, the one where I was my vegan kitchen, I kind of wanted to hammer into your head that the person that so many people on this channel think is so much smarter than them can barely operate a blender. So I want you to see that and realize for yourself that so much of this stuff that you attribute to genius that you think is impossible is well within your reach because somebody who actually is less capable than you is achieving it. But I digress. Let's get to the point. A story on me ignoring my advice when it comes to how I view failure. So we had a client ask us to install a security system in this really, really old building. And they did it via proxy. They had some really, really, really not qualified to do literally anything other than install a $50 Linksys router into somebody's home who's computer illiterate. That's all this company was qualified to do, and for some reason they hired that company to find the company to do the system. So they call me, and again, they're not getting a commission of the total price. They're getting paid a flat hourly rate. I just want to make this clear. This company was getting paid a flat hourly rate to find the right company to do this job. And they call, and they ask a bunch of questions and more bunch of questions. And the thing that they made very obvious, the thing they made incredibly obvious was that we don't need any frills. Oh, we don't need nice cabling. Oh, we don't need it to look nice. Oh, we don't need it to be this, that, and the other. He was using all the terminology that he could, all the facial expressions he could, all the body language he could to tell me that this project needed to be as cheap as possible. Yeah, big surprise. I'm sure you guys never deal with customers that want everything to be as cheap as possible. But that was the gist of what I was hearing. So we put together a plan on how to do it as cheap as possible. And I say, okay, well, we may be able to do that, but here are the compromises. So like compromise A, you are not getting some 5 megapixel high bitrate camera, you're getting this. Compromise B, we are not going to be doing any form of construction in your building. Your wires are going to be mounted along walls. Like, this is the price point that you're looking for. This is what you're going to get. You're not going to have a contractor going through concrete and brick and all this other, and running shit everywhere for the amount of money that you wanted to pay. And they're like, oh yeah, that's great. That's great. Okay, cool. So we set up everything. In the middle of setting this up, and we're like 20 or 30 hours into this job, in the middle of setting it up, one of the people from the building comes out and is looking at it like, oh, this is what you're doing? Oh, no. You can't do that. Just restart. Here's how we need you to do it. And we go, okay, well, you guys we have a signed contract pretty much explaining exactly how we're going to do this, exactly where everything's going to be placed, exactly how it's going to be. So I appreciate everything you're saying here. But this is all stuff that you could have brought up when we were directly explaining to the board, to the person who was hired by the board, how we're going to do the project. We've been here for a walkthrough 4 times. We've spent hours on the phone with you. So, yeah, you knew exactly how this was going to be. And like, oh, no, we can't do this. We spent this much money renovating the building. We spent this much money renovating the lobby. No, we can't have a wire that people can see. And I'm just listening to how much money he said that he spent renovating the entire space. And that's when I realized that there was a really big idiot other than me. I was a pretty big idiot in this project. There's an idiot other than me involved here, because this building is a building where the cheapest home, the cheapest residence in this building is $4 million. I had never seen the inside of the residences. It just looked like a building with old hallways and an old outside to me. The inside of these apartments looked like, I mean, when you die, if you believe in heaven, you're probably living in that building. Like, it's beautiful. I would have never guessed it from the outside. But every one of those apartments starts at $4 million. And I'm listening to this guy go over all this shit, and it's like, I don't really want to add salt to the wound at this point, but I really kind of want to say something along the lines of, then why the fuck were you hammering home the idea that this needed to be as cheap as possible? You're clearly all rich beyond belief. You've probably spent more money on shoes than you're spending installing this security system that you want here. So what the fuck? But anyway, we go through everything, and I'm thinking to myself, oh crap, he doesn't want it this way. He has better lawyers than me because he's rich, so he's going to contest the contract. He contests the contract, and his attorney finds something, and then I lose. This means that I have to pay to keep all this equipment. Then I get sued for damaging the building by putting wires mounted in these areas. Then, oh my God, I'm going to have to figure out how to pay the people that I work with for all the time that they spend here. And, oh man, then they're going to leave a bad review. And once they leave a bad review, that's going to all go bad. I'm going to lose my business. I'm going to lose all my money. I'm going to lose fighting this lawsuit, blah, blah. In my head, for some stupid reason, because I was dealing with so much stuff at the time, I totally lost my bearings on how I usually deal with failure, and I totally stopped listening to my own advice. Here's the reality of how it went. there was a person who worked in the building who lived in the building who actually enjoyed doing construction as a hobby. Not as a job. He wasn't one of the people that goes out and decides like, I'm going to make my living today by installing, installing this shelf or this closet in this home. When you are the type of person that can afford a $4 million apartment, that's usually not what you do for work. But it's what he did for fun as a hobby, and he used to do construction a long time ago when he was younger. So he decides that they're going to put wires that they're going to make it their project to put wires in the walls. And they had asked why we didn't do that. They did that when they were doing the renovation of the building, when the FiOS was able to do that. And we asked them, when did they do that? When they renovated the building. And I said, how much did it cost to renovate the building? And they said about $250,000 to $400,000. And I'm just thinking to myself, like, you're paying about like what, 1-2% of what the cost was to renovate the building to have this installed. And you're wondering why we didn't do the same thing. But anyway, I digress. So they decide, you know what, we'll do it ourselves. So they decide to take a week of time and spend a ridiculous amount of their own money taking the stuff that we pretty much showed them where to plug in and like destroying cement, concrete, brick, stone, all this crap, destroying it all and putting it back together with the wires. And this was like a week, 2 weeks of construction. And I would say that guy, even though it was a hobby, they probably charged the board of the building and the other people probably like, I would guess somewhere in the $30,000 to $50,000 range to do all this stuff. I'm just guessing. So I assumed, oh crap, we're fucked. But like literally somebody walked out of their fucking apartment. The guy literally walked out of his apartment and is like, I have a solution. I'm willing to do all this work. And then the guy who was bitching is like, okay, cool. I'm willing to pay you to do all this work. And it's like the guy who's complaining is not even the guy who wanted the system to begin with. He's not even the guy that asked for any of this to be done. It's not even his system. And he's just paying this guy that I've never met, that's like his neighbor, like just stupid amounts of money to fucking put wires in walls. It's like, okay, we leave. We're walking out of this place like, okay, problem solved. And then it's all done. And then we get a call saying, the system is not working. It's not working. I'm like, oh God. Okay, so first, how many things can I get in trouble for here? They ran wires inside the walls that I will never be able to get to again. They spent this much money. What if they expect me to spend that much money going into the wall to get the wires out of the wall? What if I can't make it work? What if I have to refund them? What if they sue me? What if somebody who's probably not a licensed contractor started working on a job that I was involved in? Is that guy a licensed contractor anymore? Or no, I'm like, I'm just losing my mind on all these different things. I'm like, worst case scenario, I'm going to get sued. They're going to leave bad reviews after they sue me. They're going to take all my money after they sue me. I'm going to get in trouble with licensing bureaus and whatnot and this, that, and the other. And I'm thinking, though, it's the problem with the wires. Oh, my God. So I finally get a tester. I show up, and after about a week, I get this little tester that goes in each end of the wire, and it tells me that on the other end of the wire, when I plug some of these devices in, some of them were cameras, some of them were other things. When I plug these devices in, it's using literally like, I would say 0.4 watts more than what it was using for this like 900-foot run of fucking cable than what it would have used if it was a 1-foot run of cable. And everything there was fine. That wasn't it at all. So then I'm thinking, then I get even more freaked out. I'm like, oh my God, there's got to be some type of ghost in this building. Everything's working. What if they're screwing with it? What if they are fucking with it on purpose just because they don't like us? What could possibly be going on here? What if I get sued because I can't solve it? What if somebody else walks in and solves it because it's something really, really, really simple? And that person who solves something that's really, really, really simple just figures out that, you know, that it was simple, and then asks who was the last person who does this, and what if they figure out that we're the idiots that screwed everything up and tell the world how stupid we are? And I'm going through again the lawsuits, the bad reviews, the refunds, all this stuff that I'm going through in my head on a job that was okay. It was cheap for what we did, but it was very expensive in comparison to laptop repair or like consulting on a small office network or something. It was expensive compared to that. But so all these things are going through my head, and I go there and I visit one last time when they said, we've had enough of this. You need to figure this crap out. So I visit and I notice that they decided to put a lot of the hub and the stuff that for the system that we're using, not the hub, like, you know, the equipment and all that stuff on a desk that one of the people, I think he was the super of the building, was using. And I noticed that he was talking about security systems, and he was talking about what he put together for his home, and he was talking about the experience he had with it. And what I started to notice this kind of passive aggressiveness. I started to notice this attitude that he was having, and it wasn't like he hated me. It was kind of like, it was one of those, I get paid this much to do this much work for all you people, and when it's time to actually install something that you're willing to pay for, you hire an outside company instead of hiring me kind of attitude. And I picked up on that, and I just, which is something that the other guys didn't. And then I started to notice how he was treating the system. Like when they actually weren't using a dedicated power line, like I said. They were actually plugging this crap in because they didn't want to install an outlet. And cheap. They didn't do what I told them to. So what they did is they were plugging it in to his fucking 6-tap thing, you know, with all the outlets. And when he wanted to use his drill or his drill charger or some of the other stuff that he had, like that we use for his, you know, normal job, whatever, I don't remember what it was. It was like a drill and, you know, saws, other things that supers use when building shit or maintaining shit. When he would want to use that stuff, he ran out of plugs. So you know what he would do? He would unplug my system. And you know what happened when you would unplug my system without shutting it down properly? It would fuck it up. So I figured out that a lot of my problems were not, they were totally solvable. They were totally solvable outside the worst case scenario in my head, just by showing up, just by not giving up and building it up in my head to some bullshit that it wasn't, because I thought the issue is the long wire. That's the logical thing, because that's the only part of the system that's failing. Or the other contractor installed that section. I don't know what they did. I know what my people did. I don't know what the other contractor did. They probably screwed it up and now it's on me. And oh my, instead of pulling my hair out on all of that, just fucking show up. And I just realized that, I realized when all of this crap was happening that it was a social problem. This guy didn't want to fuck up my system. That was not what he was trying to do. Rather, some part in the back of his head cared less about the sanctity of my system because he was frustrated that he wasn't the one who set it up. So when he was dealing with it, he would just unplug it instead of shutting shit down and just doing things he wasn't supposed to. So I talked to him for about 20 minutes, and I solved my problem in a social way. When I was there, I spent a half hour talking to him, and I kind of tried to get myself on a really down-to-earth level, and then I kind of tried to turn into a person that I'm not like going out of my way to seem like I'm with you, but I'm starting to, you know, just make my own realizations about the world and how these rich folks think that, you know, they can step all over us and this, that, and the other. And I got a little bond going with the guy. You know, we were talking every now and then. I said, here's what I can do. I don't know why these people decided to take your outlets away. I don't know why they decided to put this thing here, but you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to get you your own. Not only am I going to get this system set up so that even if you do accidentally unplug it, nothing's going to go wrong. I'm going to get you your own set of outlets. And I also realized that he had set there was one part of the system that he was fucking with when he was going through it to try to figure out how it works, that he actually set up to sleep after 15 minutes of not using it. This is one of those things, by the way, where if you use embedded machines, you worry less about user error. There is not an NVR on the planet. There's no NVR on the planet that's set up to go to sleep and stop recording and stop functioning if you don't touch the mouse for 15 minutes. A Windows computer is set up by default to do that. So even if you set it not to sleep after 15 minutes, a user who's fucking with it can set it up to sleep after 15 minutes. And he had done that. So I've realized this, that he was screwing with the computer. And then I also realized that he was screwing with that setup, and that even if I fixed it, he was still going to feel something. So I had to get inside this guy's head and get him to be on my side. So that was step one. Step two was setting up something for him so that he felt good about the situation. So I spent about 40 bucks. I got a UPS that was good enough to power my system for like half an hour to an hour if something went wrong with it. I got him his own set of outlets so that he wouldn't have to, you know, start screwing with my stuff or unplugging my shit if anything went wrong. And it's just such stupid shit. But it's like this was the cause of a problem that I was literally pulling my hair out about, that I thought I'm going to get sued over, that I am going to anger this entire building of rich people who have nothing to do in their retired lives but find ways to have their high-priced lawyers fuck with me. Like, I was building this up in my head to be this ridiculous thing when in reality, I solved it with a $40 fucking UPS and a 10-minute conversation with a super who just felt like he had been cheated in life. And that was it. And I got him his stuff, and if he ever unplugs my shit again, there's going to be a loud beeping noise. Nothing that I've set up will be able to be turned off, and he'll know to plug it back in. And he'll be incentivized to turn it back in because the guy no longer hates me. It's just like, it's one of these things where like I wasn't listening to my own advice. I thought at every juncture that the worst possible case scenario would happen. But the reality is there's 5 different things that can happen. When they say, listen, you need to put those wires in the wall, and I say, listen, the contract says that we're not doing that, why did my mind immediately jump to lawsuit? Why didn't it jump to maybe we can work things out? Why didn't it jump to maybe we'll have a 20-minute conversation and he'll understand that based on the conversations we originally had, that the wire has to go along the corner over there because putting it in the wall would have cost him an extra $50,000 to $100,000. What if, and I really wouldn't have never expected this in my wildest dream, but again, what if there's that 10% chance that right as that guy's complaining, there's a fucking professional construction person, carpenter person that walks out of their apartment that says, oh, I'd love to fix this all for you. Yeah, that's exactly how I planned on spending my Friday at 11 p.m. And what if the reason that your system is quote unquote turning on and off is because the power for it was not installed properly by the person who was supposed to install it, and the person who doesn't like the fact that he wasn't the one who installed it is purposely unplugging it to plug his drill and his table saw. I mean, you would never assume this shit, but it is what it is, and this is why and the same thing really applies to a lot of the motherboard repair videos that I do. I mean, I know I try to apply one thing to everything, but there's a reason for this because, you know, one of the things that frustrates me a lot is when people will say things like, well, I have no power, so I'm supposed to replace the power chip, right? I have no backlight, I'm supposed to replace the backlight chip, right? I have a flickering image on my screen, the cable is the thing that moves back and forth, therefore I have to replace the cable, right? And that's not how any of this works. Really, like, you are assuming that just because you come to a logical conclusion in your head that that's the way the world works, but that's not the way the world works at all. The reality of the way the world works is you have to investigate the cause of every single problem, and you have to think about what's going on, and then once you've investigated and once you've done your work, then you come to a conclusion. Then you come to a solution. Stop assuming that just because something something may not go right, that that's exactly how it's going to go. And don't assume that if there are 5 different steps, that every step of the way, you're going to fall down and get destroyed the worst possible way. Don't assume that just because you do something that your boss doesn't like, that means I'm definitely getting fired. Once I get fired, I'm definitely not finding another job. Once I definitely don't find another job, I'm definitely getting kicked out of my apartment. Because that line of thinking, that line of failure-based thinking, where what you're doing is you're kind of planning your failure. And what I do when I look at how things could go wrong is I make a concentrated effort to not plan my failure. I make a concentrated effort to try to learn something. I make an effort to try to learn as I go and try to fix things as I go in the best way possible. My idea is that I want to figure out what's going on before the fuck-ups catch up to me. So I want to know what's going on so that by the time my fuck-ups catch up to me, I'm so well informed and I'm so good at what I'm doing that I'm able to fix all of them, or that I've already fixed all of them before they catch up with me. I'm not looking at how I'm going to fail and caring and using that to discourage me. Can you imagine if I was thinking that way when I was deciding I have $600 left in my bank account, rent is due in 3 days, I think a great thing to do would be to spend $700 on an ultrasonic cleaner. I mean, like, do you think that's the mindset of somebody who's planning to fail? Is that the mindset of somebody who is thinking every step of the way, well, if I buy this and it doesn't go the way I want, then... No. That's the mindset of somebody who is thinking, well, what if I do that? And, well, I could fail, or it could make me money, or it could make me a lot of money, or it could make me no money, but I may be able to resell it for 90% of what I bought it for, so what the hell. That type of thinking where you're not just thinking about the if-then, if this happens, then it will go wrong in the worst possible way. When you think like that, nothing happens good. But when you think in terms of if this happens, then I could fail in the worst possible way, or I could fail, but it wouldn't really be that bad, or I could fail, but somebody else will help me fix it, or I could fail, but somebody else will fix it, even not wanting to. Or I could fail, but then I fix it myself. Or I fail, but then I realize that what I was trying to do was not even the right thing to do anyway, and then I figure out the thing I should have been doing all along. There are so many different ways that things can go. Don't assume that it's going to go the worst possible way. It's just the way that I think. And many people are going to have their own ways that they deal with business planning and how they deal with business failure and how they deal with implementing new ideas. But this is what gives me comfort at night, and this is what helps me sleep, is knowing that when I do something that is a big move or something that could go in a really bad way or something that I know is going to be the best thing for my company, I know this is what I need to do, but there are so many ways that it can fail. What helps me sleep at night and what helps me not have stress, what helps me lead a lifestyle where I'm not worried all the time and taking shit out on other people and getting angry at other people. What allows me to smile as everything is going wrong is the idea that the worst case scenario is the least likely thing to happen. Because there are so many other things that can happen just by sheer, rule of chance and probability. The worst case scenario is most likely not going to happen. This is a really incoherent and rambling video, and most people are probably going to say that I should start scripting what I do. And I've tried, believe it or not, because this is probably one of the most important parts of my business mindset. Like, this is what has driven me this entire time. This is what has allowed me to work 80 hours a week at places like Avatar Studios and Progressive Music when I was a teenager. It's what allowed me to continue when I was sitting in the store, trying to fix a motherboard and realizing I have no idea what the hell I'm doing. What in God's name did I do spending over $1,000 on all $2,000 on all these tools that I don't know how to pay for? What am I going to do? Like, this is what allowed me to continue moving forward with all these ideas when I realized that they probably weren't going to go the way I wanted. That's what allowed me to recover from a business like Rossmann Supply Group that totally, like, just in the worst possible way, failed financially, economically. In every single possible way, that business was a complete and utter failure. And I had another business that was going decently, but the way I was able to keep myself in the game and the way I was able to kind of keep myself from losing it and from getting depressed and deciding I don't want to come to work because I failed and I don't want to do this because it's probably just going to fail and all these bad things are going to happen to me, and what allowed me to really recover from the things I've done in life that were not good was this way of thinking where the worst case thing that's going to happen, no, it's probably not. It really just isn't. It's like, you know what? There's a chance of that happening, but there's a much greater chance that all these other things that are not as bad as what I built up in my head are going to happen as well. So when you hear that voice in your head that's telling you about the worst possible thing that's going to happen, just tell it to shut the fuck up. And if you can't get it to shut the fuck up, then have all those other voices in your head that are telling you about all the other things that could happen that are not terrible, start speaking. Get those people to start talking louder because they're going to help you a lot over the course of your business life. And hopefully this has helped you in some way.